of the FBI to potential termination.
Yes.
Why shouldn't U.S. officials use mobile devices when traveling to foreign countries, especially if they're discussing classified or sensitive information?
Because the mobile device will transmit its signal across networks that are likely controlled or at least accessed by that hostile power.
That's the guidance that the FBI gives all officials when they're traveling overseas. That's still good guidance, correct?
That's good guidance.
How did top secret information end up on the private server? Because your statement addressed Secretary Clinton. You did not address any of her aides. In your statement, Attorney General Lynch exonerated everybody. That information just didn't get there on its own. So how did it get there? Were you able to determine that?
Yes, by people talking about a top secret subject in an email communication.
So
it's not about forwarding a top secret document. It's about having a conversation about a matter that is top secret.
And those were things that were originated by Secretary Clinton's aides and then sent to her, which was obviously being her server, but it was also included Secretary Clinton originating those emails, correct?
That's correct. In most circumstances, it initiated with aides starting a conversation. In the one involving top secret information, Secretary Clinton, though, also not only received but also sent emails that talked about the same subject.
And of that top secret information that you found, would somebody who was sophisticated in those matters, should it have been obvious to them that that was very sensitive information?
Yes.
So I guess my issue about knowledge of what you're doing is, in order for Secretary Clinton to have access to top secret SCI information, didn't she have to sign a form with the State Department acknowledging her duties and responsibilities under the law to safeguard this information?
Yes. Anybody who gets access to SCI, sensitive compartmented information, would sign what's called a read-in form that lays that out. I'm sure members of Congress have seen the same thing.
And it stresses in that document, and other training people would get, that there are certain requirements to handling certain levels of information. For example, a top secret document, that can't even be on your secret system at the FBI, correct?
Correct.
So you have to follow certain guidelines. And I guess my question is she's a very sophisticated person. She did execute that document, correct?
Yes.
And her aides who were getting the classified information, they executed similar documents to get a security clearance, correct?
I believe so.
And she knowingly, clearly set up her own private server in order to, well, actually, let me ask you that. Was the reason she set up her own private server, in your judgment, because she wanted to shield communications from Congress and from the public?
I can't say that. Our best information is she set it up as a matter of convenience. It was an already existing system that her husband had, and she decided to have a domain on that system.
So the question is very sophisticated. This is information that clearly anybody who had knowledge of security information would know that it would be classified. But I'm having a little bit trouble to see, how would you not then know that that was something that was inappropriate to do?
Well, I just want to take one of your assumptions about sophistication. I don't think that our investigation established that she was actually particularly sophisticated with respect to classified information and the levels and the treatment. And so far as we can tell,
isn't she an original classification authority, though?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good grief. Well, I appreciate you coming, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record two documents that Mr. DeSantis referred to. One is the sensitive compartmented information non-disclosure agreement. The other one is the classified information non-disclosure agreement, both signed by Hillary Rodham Clinton. Without objection, so ordered. Now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Comey, for being here today, and for the professionals whom you lead at the FBI. 2 years ago, after my
Wyoming are having, they have access to this statute. It's Title 18 U.S.
Cynthia Loomis, Republican from Wyoming.
It says, whoever being an officer, employee, contractor, or consultant to the United States, and by virtue of his office, employment, position, or contract, becomes possessed of documents or materials containing classified information of the United States, knowingly removes such documents or materials without authority and with the intent to retain such documents or materials at an unauthorized location, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 1 year or both. Armed with that information, they're wondering how Hillary Clinton, who is also an attorney, and attorneys are frequently held to a higher standard of knowledge of the law, how this could not have come to her attention. She was the Secretary of State. Of course, the Secretary of State is going to become possessed of classified materials. Of course she was attorney. She practiced with a prominent Arkansas law firm, the Rose Law Firm. She knew from her White House days with her husband, the president, the classified materials can be very dangerous if they get into the wrong hands. She had to have known about this statute because she had to have been briefed when she took over the job as the Secretary of State. So how, given that body of knowledge and experience, could this have happened in a way that could have potentially provided access by hackers to confidential information?
No, it's a good question, a reasonable question. The protection we have as Americans is that the government, in general and in that statute in particular, has to prove before they can prosecute any of us that we did this thing that's forbidden by the law, and that when we did it, we knew we were doing something that was unlawful. We don't have to know the code number, but that we knew we were doing something that was unlawful. That's the protection we have, and it's one I've worked for very hard. When I was in the private sector, I did a lot of work with the Chamber of Commerce to stop the criminalization of negligence in the United States.
You know, though, may I interrupt and suggest that this statute says knowingly remove such documents or materials without authority and with the intent to retain such documents or materials at an unauthorized location. The intent here in the statute is to retain the documents at an unauthorized location. It's not intent to pass them on to a terrorist or to someone out in internet land. It's just the intent to retain the documents or materials at an unauthorized location.
It's more than that, though. You'd have to show that and prove criminal intent, both by law, that's the way the judge would instruct a jury, and practice of the Department of Justice. They have reserved that statute, even though it's just a misdemeanor, for people who clearly knew they were breaking the law, and that's the challenge. So should have known, must have known, had to know, does not get you there. You must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they knew they were engaged in something that was unlawful.
Okay,
that's the challenge.
May I turn to her attorneys? Did all of Secretary Clinton's attorneys have the requisite clearances at the time they received all of her emails, especially those that were classified at the time they were sent?
No.
They destroyed, as has been noted, 30,000 emails of Secretary Clinton's. Do you have 100% confidence that none of the 30,000 emails destroyed by Secretary Clinton's attorneys was marked as classified?
I don't have 100% confidence. I'm reasonably confident some of them were classified. There were only 3 in the entire batch we found that bore any markings that indicated they were classified, so that's less likely, but surely it's a reasonable assumption that some of the ones they deleted contain classified information.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
As being classified, I just want to show you this is a book that was written by former Secretary of State Colin Powell, and in his book he says, to complement the official State Department computer in my office, I installed a laptop computer and on a private line. My personal email account on the laptop allowed me to direct access to anyone online. So I started shooting emails to my principal assistants, to individual ambassadors, and increasingly to my foreign minister colleagues who, like me, were trying to bring their ministries into the 186,000 miles per second world. Were you aware of this, that Secretary Colin Powell actually had a private server as well?
Not a private server. I think he used a commercial email account for State Department business.
Private line, unprotected.
Correct. Not a State Department email system.
Right, right. You went rogue, so to speak. Right?
I don't know if I'd say that.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. But do you think this was careless for him to do that? To start, get his own, he got his own system. He installed a laptop computer on a private line. My personal email account was on a laptop and allowed me direct access to anyone online. That's his own statement. I'm just trying to compare secretaries of state because Secretary Powell's never been here. Matter of fact, when we asked him for his emails, unlike the 55,000 that we received from Secretary Clinton, he said, "I don't have any to turn over." This is a quote. This was on ABC's this week. He explained, "I don't have any to turn over. I didn't keep a cache of them. I did not print them off. I do not have thousands of pages somewhere in my personal files." But he was Secretary of State, and he operated on a private system. Were you aware of that?
Not at the time, 15 years ago, but I am now.
Yeah. Okay. So recently, back in October 2015, the State Department sent Secretary Powell a letter requesting that he contact his email provider, AOL, to determine whether any of his emails are still on the unclassified systems. Are you aware of that ongoing investigation?
I don't know of an investigation.
That request for information from Secretary Powell, former Secretary.
Yes, I am.
You're aware of that. Are you surprised that he has never responded?
I don't know enough to comment. I don't know exactly what conversation he had with the State Department.
All right. I'm trying to look at the, where we have a lot of comparisons in other cases, and it seems like all the cases where prosecutions have gone forward, the subject of the investigation has demonstrated a clear intent to deliver classified information to a person or persons who were unauthorized to receive that. So if you look at the, PFC, Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, that was a court-martial, but he demonstrated a clear intent to publish that information, which was classified. Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks editor, I guess, and publisher, again, a wide and deliberate attempt to publish classified information. General Petraeus, which we talked about earlier today, shared information with his biographer. Jeffrey Sterling, sending stuff to the New York Times. Former CIA officer Kiriakou, who was interested in writing a book, so he hung on to his information. And even former director of the CIA, John Deutsch, who retained classified information on a couple of servers, one in Belmont, Massachusetts, and one in Bethesda, Maryland. And that was after he became a private citizen. So in all those cases, there's a clear intent. As you said before, you look at what people did and what they were thinking when they did that. And I would just ask you, is there a clear distinction between what those people did and what Secretary Clinton did in her case?
In my view, yes. The Deutsch case illustrates it perfectly. And he took huge amount of documents, almost all at the TSSCI level, had them in hard copy at his house, had them on an unclassed system connected to the internet, attempted to destroy some of them when he got caught, admitted, "I knew I wasn't supposed to be doing this." So you have clear intent, huge amounts of documents, obstruction of justice. Those are the kind of cases that get prosecuted. That's what I said when I meant it when I said it. In my experience, which is 3 decades, no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case. I know that frustrates people, but that's the way the law is, and that's the way the practice is of the Department of Justice.
All right, thank you for your testimony and for your service. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman.
Conclusion you reach. Never have I, nor will I, criticize your service, and we appreciate your service to this country and the integrity. So I'm going to focus on the things that you said, not the conclusion that you drew. And Congressman Trey Gowdy and I talked a little bit about this, but on February 4th, 2016, Secretary Clinton, during a presidential debate, said, "I never sent or received any classified material, they are retroactively classifying it, close quote. And so in your statement on July 5th, you said that there were indeed 110 emails, 52 email chains, which there was classified information on it at the time it was sent or received. So those two statements, both of them cannot be true. Is that correct? Your statement and her statement.
Yeah, it's not accurate to say that she did not send or receive classified.
So she did not tell the truth during that presidential debate that she never sent or received classified information and it was retroactively classified.
Yeah, I don't think that's a question I should be answering. What was in her head during...
Either your statement's not true or hers is not true. Both of them cannot be true. So is your statement true?
That I can speak to.
Your statement is true, so the American people will have to judge with her statement not being true. So let me go on to another one. On October 22nd, she said there was nothing marked classified on emails either sent or received. And in your statement, you said a very small number of emails contain classified information, board markings indicating the presence of classified information at the time. So she makes a statement that says there was no markings. You make a statement that there was, so her statement was not true.
Well, that one actually have a little bit of insight into her statement because we asked her about that. There were 3 documents that bore portion markings where you're obligated when something is classified to put a marking on that paragraph.
Right.
And there were 3 that bore C in parens, which means that's confidential classified information.
So a reasonable person who has been a senator, a secretary of state, a first lady, wouldn't a reasonable person know that that was a classified marking as a secretary of state?
Yeah.
A reasonable person. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, before this investigation, I probably would have said yes. I'm not so sure. I don't find it incredible.
Director Comey, come on. I mean, I've only been here a few years, and I understand the importance of those markings. So you're suggesting that a long length of time that she had no idea what a classified marking would be? That's your sworn testimony today?
No, not that she would have no idea what a classified marking would be, but it's an interesting question as to whether this question about sophistication came up earlier, whether she was actually sophisticated enough to understand what a C in parens means.
So you're saying this former Secretary of State is not sophisticated enough to understand a classified marking?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
That's a huge statement.
No, I'm saying, you asked me, did I assume that someone would know? Probably before this investigation I would have. I'm not so sure of that answer any longer. I think it's possible that she didn't understand what a C meant when she saw it in the body of an email like that. It's possible.
After years in the Senate and Secretary of State, I mean, that's hard for me and the American people to believe, Director Comey, and I'm not questioning your analysis of it, but wouldn't a reasonable person think that someone who has the highest job of handling classified information understand that?
I think that's a conclusion a reasonable person would draw. It may not be accurate, but that's
so in that, let me go a little bit further, because that last quote actually came on October 22nd, 2015, under sworn testimony before the Benghazi Committee. So if she gave sworn testimony that a reasonable person would suggest was not truthful, isn't it a logical assumption that she may have misled Congress, and we need to look at that further?
Well, the reasonable person test is not what you look at for perjury or false statements, but like I said, I can understand why people would ask that question.
All right, so let me, in the last little portion of this, in your 3.5-hour interview on Saturday, did she contradict some of these public statements in private? Because you said she didn't lie to the FBI, but it's apparent that she lied to the American people. So did she change her statements in that sworn testimony with you last Saturday?
I haven't gone through that to parse that.
Can you do that and get back to this committee? Because it's important, I think, to the American people and to transparency.
Oh, I'm sure. And as the chairman and I have talked about, I'm sure the committee is going to want to see the documents in our investigation and whatnot, and we'll work to give you whatever we can possibly give you under our law. But I haven't done that analysis at this point.
Will you get that back to us?
Gentleman's time has expired.
Pilloried before this committee. We're all highly partisan here. We're good backseat drivers. We're all today apparently armchair prosecutors. And you stated the truth when you said that you didn't know of anyone who would bring a case like this. And some of the prosecutors have had decades to do that. I hope that this committee's effort is not intended to intimidate you or the FBI or law enforcement in general or government employees. And I'm thankful at this moment that you have such a lifetime record of speaking truth to power. Rely on my Republican colleagues to make sure that Hillary Clinton's treated no better than anybody else. There should be some attention given to make sure that she's not treated any worse than anybody else. I think we all know that we wouldn't be having this hearing, especially on an emergency basis, unless she were running for president. My colleague from Massachusetts has just pointed out that previous secretaries of state are not being called on the carpet, whether that be Condoleezza Rice or Colin Powell or others. But I think the grossest double standard here today is the fact that all the members of this committee, every member of Congress, is not subject to the same law that Secretary Clinton was subject to. And as lawmakers, that means that we have exempted ourselves from the standard of other federal employees. My colleague from DC, Ms. Norton, referred to this. Why did we exempt ourselves from the same rules? Apparently our chairman lists his private email account on his business card. We all have access to classified information. So I would like to challenge my Republican colleagues here today. Let's work together and introduce legislation to make the same laws apply to us as apply to the executive branch and to Secretary Clinton. I would be happy to join in such legislation to make sure that we're not being hypocritical on this panel, that we're holding ourselves to the same standards as Secretary Clinton, and not trying to accuse her of things that we may be guilty of ourselves. I bet my colleagues would be the first to complain if, for example, emails were retroactively classified. She either received or sent.
Right. And it also is accurate that
Republican from Tennessee.
Clean their devices in such a way as to preclude complete forensic recovery.
Correct.
And also, when she said, when Secretary Clinton said that nothing she sent was marked classified, and you said in your press conference, but even if information is not marked classified in an email, particularly our participants who know or should know that the subject matter is classified are still obligated to protect it. Do you feel that Secretary Clinton knew or should have known that she was obligated to protect classified information?
Yes.
With her legal background and her long experience in government. Also, she said at one point that she has directed all emails, work-related emails, to be forwarded to the State Department. Is it also accurate that you discovered thousands of other emails that were work-related other than the 30,000 that she submitted?
Correct.
Before I came to Congress, I spent several years as a criminal court judge. I presided over several hundred felony criminal cases. And I can assure you that I saw many cases where the evidence of criminal intent was flimsier than the evidence in this case. But do you realize, or do you realize that great numbers of people across this country felt that you presented such an incriminating case against Secretary Clinton in your press conference that they were very surprised or even shocked when you reached the conclusion to let her off? Do you doubt that great numbers feel that way?
No, I think so, and I understand the questions, and I want it to be as transparent as possible. We went at this very hard to see if we could make a case, and I wanted the American people to see what I honestly believed about the whole thing.
Well, do you understand, as the chairman said earlier, that great numbers of people feel now that there's one standard of justice for the Clintons and another for regular people?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. It's not true, but I've heard it a lot.
Well, even the ranking member who was here, who course, as we understand, had to defend Secretary Clinton as strongly as possible. He almost begged you to explain the gap between the incriminating case that you presented and the conclusion that was reached. Did that surprise you?
Streaming.
Half years as an undercover officer in the CIA. I was the guy in the back alleys collecting intelligence, passing it to lawmakers. I've seen my friends killed. I've seen assets put themselves in harm's way. And this is about protecting information, the most sensitive information the American government has. And I wish my colleagues would take this a little more seriously. Mr. Comey, Director Comey, excuse me. That includes SCI information. Does SCI information include humans and SIGINT?
Yes.
Human and SIGINT, human intelligence information collected from people that are putting themselves in harm's way to give us information to drive foreign policy. Signals intelligence, some of the most sensitive things to understand what Al-Qaeda is doing, what ISIS is doing. So, the former Secretary of State had an unauthorized server. Those are your words. In her basement, correct?
Correct.
Who was protecting that information? Who was protecting that server?
Well, not much. There was a number of different people who were assigned as administrators of the server.
And at least 7 emails chains, or 8, that was classified as TSSCI.
Correct.
So the former Secretary of State, one of the president's most important advisors on foreign policy and national security, had a server in her basement that had information that was collected from our most sensitive assets, and it was not protected by anyone, and that's not a crime? That's outrageous. People are concerned. What does it take for someone to misuse classified information and get in trouble for it?
Well, it takes mishandling it and criminal intent.
And so an unauthorized server in the basement is not mishandling.
Well, no, there is evidence of mishandling here. This whole investigation at the end focused on, is there sufficient evidence of intent?
Was this unanimous opinion within the FBI on your decision?
Well, the whole FBI wasn't involved, but the team of agents, investigators, analysts, technologists, yes.
Did you take into any consideration the impact that this precedence can set on our ability to collect intelligence overseas?
Yes. My primary concern is the impact on what other employees might think in the federal government.
And you don't think this sends a message to other employees that if the former Secretary of State can have an unauthorized server in their basement that transmits top secret information, that's not a problem?
Oh, I worry very much about that. That's why I talked about that in my statement, because an FBI employee might face severe discipline, and I want them to understand that those consequences are still going to be there.
Director Comey, do you have a server in your basement?
I do not.
Does anybody in the FBI have a server in their basement or in their house?
I don't know. Not to
Do you think it's likely?
I think it's unlikely.
I would think so too. I would think so too, because I've been proud to serve alongside the men and women that you represent. So there was no dissenting opinion when you made this decision. It's your job to be involved in counterintelligence as well.
Yes.
So that means protecting our secrets from foreign adversaries, collecting them. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did this activity you investigated make America's secrets vulnerable to hostile elements?
Yes.
Do you think that pattern of behavior would continue?
I'm sorry, I missed the
Do
last.
you think that pattern of behavior would continue?
Would continue.
By our former Secretary of State?
I'm not following. You mean if this had not come to light, you mean?
Right now, based based on what we see, do you think there's going to be other elements within the federal government that think it's okay to have an unauthorized server in their basement?
Well, they better not. That's one of the reasons I'm talking about.
So, but what is the ramifications of them doing that? How is there going to be any consequences levered if it's not being levered here? Because indeed, you're setting a precedent.
Yeah, the precedent, I want people to understand, again, I only am responsible for the FBI, that there will be discipline from termination to reprimand and everything in between for people who mishandle classified information.
Mr. Director Comey, I'm not a lawyer, and so I may misstate this. Is there such a thing as the case of first impression? And why was this not possibly one of those?
There is such a thing, which just means the first time you do something. The reason this isn't one of those is that's just not fair. That would be treating somebody differently because of their celebrity status or because of some other factor. It doesn't matter. We have to treat people. It's the bedrock of our system of justice. We treat people fairly. We treat them the same based on their conduct.
And that person mishandling the most sensitive information that this government can collect is not fair? It's not fair to punish someone who did that?
Not on these facts. It would be fair. That person worked for me. It would be fair to have a robust disciplinary proceeding. It's not fair to prosecute that person on these facts.
I think,
Mr. Chairman, I yield back the time I do not have.
Thank you. I think bipartisan sentiments like that are few and far between around here, and I appreciate Congressman Meadows' remark. You are a man of integrity, Director Comey. It's troubling to me that remark from Congressman Meadows is not unanimous at this point. It used to be. Just weeks ago, our chairman, Representative Chaffetz, stated on national TV that Republicans, quote, believe in James Comey, unquote. He said this, and I quote, I do think that in all of the government, he is a man of integrity and honesty. His finger's on the pulse of this. Nothing happens without him, and I think he is going to be the definitive person to make a determined career.
And first question I want to ask you, is this hearing unfair? Has it been unfair to you?
No.
Thank you. One purpose of security procedures for classified information is to prevent hostile nations from obtaining classified information. Is that fair?
Yes.
And did hostile nations obtain classified information from Secretary Clinton's servers?
I don't know. It's possible, but we don't have direct evidence of that. We couldn't find direct evidence.
I want to, without making this a law school class, I want to try to get into intent. There are various levels of intent in the criminal law, everything from knowingly and willfully doing something all the way down to strict liability. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes.
And in Title 18, most of the criminal laws in Title 18 have the words knowingly and willfully in them, and that is the standard typically that United States attorneys prosecute under.
Most do. Unlawfully, knowingly, and willfully is our standard formulation for charging a case.
And there are also a variety of others between the knowingly and willfully standard and the strict liability standard. And many, like environmental crimes, have a much lower standard because of the toxic materials that are at risk of harming individuals. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's talk about this particular statute, 18 U.S.C. 1924. I take it we could all agree, or you and I can agree on a couple of the elements. Secretary Clinton was an employee of the United States.
Correct.
And as a result of that employment, she received classified information.
Correct.
And there's no doubt about those two elements. Now, I don't know whether the next element is one element or two, but it talks about knowingly remove such materials without authority and with the intent to retain such material at an unauthorized location. So I'm going to treat those as two separate parts of the intent element. First of all, do you see the word willfully anywhere in this statute?
I don't.
Okay. And that would indicate to you that there is a lower threshold for intent?
No, it wouldn't.
Why?
Because we often, as I understand the Justice Department's practice and judicial practice, will impute to any criminal statute at that level with a knowingly also a requirement that you know that you're involved in criminal activity of some sort, a general mens rea requirement.
So, and you would apply that same standard to environmental crimes?
No, if it specifically says it's a negligence-based crime, I don't think a judge would impute that.
But Congress specifically omitted the word willfully from this statute, and yet you are implying the word willfully in the statute. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. So what the statute does say is knowingly remove such materials without authority. Is it fair that she knew that she didn't have authority to have this server in her basement?
Yes, that's true.
And she knew that she was receiving materials, classified information, in the emails that she received on her BlackBerry and other devices.
I can't answer. I'm hesitating as a prosecutor because it's always to what level of proof. I do not believe there's evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that she knew she was receiving classified information in violation of the requirements.
But that's not my question.
Evidence of that.
That's my question. My question, in fairness, is: did she know that she was receiving information on the servers at her location?
Oh, so I'm sorry. Yeah, of course, yes. She knew she was using her email system.
And as Secretary of State, she also knew that she would be receiving classified information.
Yes, in general.
Okay. And did she then have the intent to retain such material at an unauthorized location? She retained the material that she received as Secretary of State at her server in her basement, and that was unauthorized.
You're asking me, did she have and I'm going to ask you the burden of proof question in a second, but did she have the intent to retain classified information on the server, or just to retain any information on the server?
Well, we've already established that she knew as Secretary of State that she was going to receive classified information in her emails. And so did she retain such information that she received as Secretary of State on her servers in her basement?
She did, in fact. There is, in my view, not evidence beyond certainly probable cause. There's not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that she knew she was receiving classified information or that she intended to retain it on her server. There's evidence of that. But when I said there's not clear evidence of intent, that's what I meant. I could not, even if the Department of Justice would bring that case, I could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt those two elements.
Thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman.
Good government, like working to eliminate improper payments or prevent wasteful programs duplication. Before I joined Congress, I had the privilege of serving in the Army for 23 years, and and as I tackled those challenges and in the challenges of helping reduce veterans' homelessness, I witnessed firsthand the real-world importance of improving and streamlining government operations, how even the best policies in the world will not work without proper implementation. And so when it comes to implementing true and lasting reforms that will make sure the electronic records and other records and the history of our great nation are preserved for future generations, I've done my best to approach this goal seriously. I'm focused on making sure that our nation sustains a long-term commitment to modernizing our federal record-keeping system, from improving the laws governing what needs to be collected, to ensuring our civil servants across government have the necessary tools to achieve what should be nonpartisan and a shared goal. With respect to examining the tough lessons learned from numerous record-keeping incidents that our committee has dealt with, which transcend any one agency or any single administration, my mission is clear. Make sure that we here in Congress move beyond partisan politics and engage in the serious, hard work of ensuring that the laws written in an era of pen and paper are overhauled to meet the digital challenges of the 21st century. Dr. Comey, the Office of
Land don't have the understanding on what it takes to keep our country secure, that we do the necessary government reform to put laws in place that will be effective and will meet the needs of distinguished agencies and important agencies like the FBI. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for doing this hearing. It's our responsibility to oversight and reform as necessary. In going back, Director Comey, to paraphrase the Espionage Act, people in the 7th District of Michigan understand it from this perspective in common sense, what it says, that whoever being entrusted with information related to national defense through gross negligence permits the information to be removed from its proper place in violation of their trust shall be fined or imprisoned under the statute. There doesn't seem to be a double standard there. It doesn't express intent. You've explained your understanding of why intent is needed, and we may agree or disagree on that, but the general public looking at that statute says it's pretty clear. The question I would ask, Director Comey,
What's your definition of extremely careless, if you could go through that?
I intended it as a common sense term. It's one of those kind of you know it when you see it sort of things. Somebody who is should know better. Someone who is demonstrating a lack of care that strikes me as there's ordinary accidents and then there's just real sloppiness. So I think of that as kind of real sloppiness.
So you stated that you had found 110 emails on Secretary Clinton's server that were classified at the time they were sent or received. Yet Secretary Clinton has insisted for over a year publicly that she never sent or received any classified emails. The question I have from that, would it be difficult for any cabinet level official, and specifically any cabinet official, let alone one who is a former White House resident or U.S. Senator, to determine if information is classified?
Would it be difficult?
Would it be difficult?
That's hard to answer in the abstract. It depends upon the context in which they're hearing it or seeing it. Obviously, if it's marked, which is why we require markings, it's easy. It's just too hard to answer because there's so many other situations you might encounter it.
But with the training that we receive, and certainly a Secretary of State would receive, or someone who lives in the White House, it goes a little above and beyond just the common sense individual out there trying to determine, knowing that classified information will be brought and to remove to an unauthorized site ought to cause a bit of pause there, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and if you're a government official, you should be attentive to it. Because you know that the matters you deal with could involve sensitive information, so sure.
So Secretary Clinton's revised statement that she never knowingly sent or received any classified information is probably also untrue.
I don't want to comment on people's public statements. We did not find evidence sufficient to establish that she knew she was sending classified information beyond a reasonable doubt to meet that the intent standard. But like I said, I understand why people are confused by the whole discussion. I get that. But you know what would be a double standard? If she were prosecuted for gross negligence.
But your statement on Tuesday said there is evidence to support a conclusion that any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation.
I stand by that.
And that's very clear.
That's the definition of carelessness, of negligence.
Which happened,
oh yeah,
as a result of our former Secretary of State's decisions.
Yes.
Is it your statement then before this committee that Secretary Clinton should have known not to send classified material, and yet she did?
Certainly she should have known not to send classified information. As I said, that's the definition of negligent. I think she was extremely careless. I think she was negligent. That I could establish. What we can't establish is that she acted with the necessary criminal intent.
Do you believe that that since the Department of Justice hasn't used the statute Congress passed, it's invalid?
No, I think they're worried that it's invalid, that it will be challenged on constitutional grounds, which is why they've used it extraordinarily sparingly in the decades.
Thank you. Yield back.
Subject that was something that you should look into. You had that responsibility, is that correct?
Yes.
We have a responsibility to hear from you on the action that you took this weekend, and tomorrow we'll go back to our districts, and we have to explain to people, albeit a couple of cafes where I see folks at meetings, and they're going to ask a lot of questions about what took place. Have you seen the Broadway production Hamilton?
Not yet. I'm hoping to.
I haven't either, but I understand it won the choreography Tony Award. I think you and others know that. The problem I have in explaining to my constituents is what's come down. It almost looks like choreography. Let me just go over it real quickly with you. Last Tuesday, not this week, 1 week ago, meets with the Attorney General in Phoenix. The next Friday, last Friday, Mrs. Lynch, the AG, she is going to defer to the FBI on whatever you came up with. On Saturday morning, I saw the vans pull up. This is this past Saturday, and you questioned Secretary Clinton for 3 hours. Is that, I guess that's correct?
3.5 it went.
Okay. And then on Tuesday morning, the morning after July 4th, we watched in our office. I had my interns. I said, come in. We've got the FBI director. Let's hear what he has to say. We're all kind of startled. And you basically said you were going to recommend not to prosecute, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And then Tuesday, well, we had President Obama and Secretary Clinton arrive in Charlotte at 2 o'clock, and shortly thereafter, we had the Attorney General is closing the case. This is rapid fire. I mean, now, my folks think that there's something fishy about this. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there are a lot of questions on how this came down. I have questions about how this came down. Did you personally interview the secretary on Saturday morning?
I didn't personally, no.
And how many agents did?
I think we had 5 or 6 in the...
Did you talk to all of those agents after the interview?
I did not speak to all of them, no.
Did she testify or talk to them under oath?
No.
She did not. Well, that's a problem. But
no, it's still a crime to lie to us.
I know it is. Do you have a transcript of that?
No, we don't record our...
do you have a 302, I guess it's called analysis?
I do. I don't have it with me, but I do.
Did you read it?
Yes.
You did. Can we get a copy of it since the case is closed?
I don't know the answer.
I would like a copy of it provided to the committee. I would like also for the last 30 days any communications between you or any agent or any person in the FBI with the Attorney General or those in authority in the Department of Justice on this matter. Could you provide us with that?
We'll provide you with whether we can under the law and under our policy. It'll actually be easy in my case.
You see, the problem that I have, though, is I have to go back and report to people what took place.
Sure.
Now, did you write the statement that you gave on Tuesday?
Yes.
You did. And did you write, and you said you didn't talk to all of the agents, but all of the agents, did they meet with you? And then, is that the group that said that we all vote to not recommend prosecution?
Well, yeah, I did not meet with all of the agents. I've met with, I guess I've met with all of them at
we're
various
getting
times.
the word that it was like unanimous out of FBI that we don't prosecute.
Or what's your question, Congressman?
Well, again, I want to know who counseled you. You read their summary. Okay, she was not under oath. And it appears, I mean, members have cited here where she lied or misled to Congress, which will lead now to the next step of our possibly giving you a referral on this matter. You're aware of that?
Yes, someone mentioned that earlier.
And that probably will happen. Thank you for shedding some light on what took place.
Very briefly, I hope what you'll tell the folks in the cafe is, look me in the eye and listen to what I'm about to say. I did not coordinate that with anyone. The White House, the Department of Justice, nobody outside the FBI family had any idea what I was about to say. I say that under oath. I stand by that. There was no coordination. There was an insinuation of what you were saying that I don't mean to get strong in responding, but I want to make sure I was definitive about that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, now,
and Coulter has a piece saying that if he does this, it's the first thing that she's disagreed with Trump on. She's very, very concerned about it. She says if Trump goes out and picks an elected Republican to be his VP, then the thing is going to happen is he's going to be impeached in 6 months.
You said that hostile actors successfully gained access to the commercial email accounts of people Secretary Clinton regularly communicated with. In the case of the Romanian hacker Guccifer, according to accessing Sidney Blumenthal's account, and that's been public for some time. During your investigation, were there other people in the State Department or that regularly communicated with Secretary Clinton that you can confirm were successfully hacked?
Yes.
And were these folks that regularly communicated with the Secretary?
Yes.
And were you able to conclude definitively that the attempted hacks referenced in the IG report were not successful?
We were not able to conclude that they were successful. I think that's the best way to say it.
All right, so while you said that given the nature of Clinton's server, you'd be unlikely to see evidence one way or the other of whether or not it had been successfully hacked, how many unsuccessful attempts did you uncover? Did you find any there?
There were unsuccessful attempts. I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Do you have an idea, were they from foreign governments? Where did they come from?
I want to be careful what I say in an open setting, and so we can give you that information, but I don't want to give any foreign government's knowledge of what I know. So they're
all right, but would you be so far as to say they probably weren't American high school students fooling around?
Correct. It was not limited to criminal activity.
During your investigation, did you or anyone in the FBI interview the hacker Guccifer?
Yes.
And he claimed he gained access to Sid Blumenthal's email account and traced him back to Clinton's private server. Can you confirm that Guccifer never gained access to her server?
Yeah, he did not. He admitted that was a lie.
All right, well, at least that's good to hear. All right, Section 793 of Title 18 of the United States Code makes it a crime to allow classified information to be stolen through gross negligence. Were you to discover that hostile actors had actually gotten into Secretary Clinton's email, would that have changed your recommendation with respect to prosecuting her?
Unlikely, although we didn't consider that question because we didn't have those facts.
All right, I want to go back to the question of intent real quick for just a second. I'm a recovering attorney. It's been decades since I actually practiced law. But you kept referring to, she had to know it was illegal to have the requisite criminal intent. I was always taught in law school, and I don't know where this changed, that ignorance of the law was no excuse. If I'm driving along at 45 miles an hour and didn't see the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, I was still intentionally speeding, even though I didn't know it. Now, I might not have had the requisite criminal intent if maybe my accelerator were jammed or something like that, but even though I didn't know the law was 35, I was driving 45, I'm going to get a ticket, and I'm probably going to be prosecuted for that. So how can you say ignorance of the law is an excuse in Mrs. Clinton's case?
Well, the comparison to petty offenses I don't think is useful, but the question of ignorance of the law is no excuse. But here's the distinction. You have to have general criminal intent. You don't need to know what particular statute you're violating, but you must be aware of the generally wrongful nature of your conduct.
So Congress, when they enacted that statute, said gross negligence. Yep. That doesn't say intent. So what are we going to have to enact to get you guys to prosecute something based on negligence or gross negligence? So we're going to have to add, and oh, by the way, we really do mean you don't have to have intent there?
That's a conversation for you all to have with the Department of Justice, but it would have to be something more than the statute enacted in 1917, because for 99 years they've been very worried about its constitutionality.
All right, well, I think that's something this committee and Congress as a whole, the Judiciary Committee, that Mr. Chaffetz and I also sit on, will be looking at it. And I was on television this morning, and I just want to relay a question that I received from a caller into that television commercial. And it's just real simple. Why should any person follow the law if our leaders don't? And we can argue about intent or not, but you laid out the fact that she basically broke the law, but you couldn't prove intent. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I do want to know why any person should follow the law if our leaders don't have to. Maybe that's rhetorical, but I'll give you an opportunity to comment on that.
That's a question I'm no more qualified to answer than any American citizen. It's an important question. In terms of my work, in my world, my folks would not be, one of my employees would not be prosecuted for this. They would face consequences for this. So the notion that it's either prosecute or you walk around, smiling all day long is just not true for those people who work for the government. The broader question is one for a democracy to answer. It's not for me.
And I guess the ultimate decision as to whether or not Mrs. Clinton works in government or not is in everybody's hands.
I thank the gentleman.
Go back.
Well, now,
In his opening statement, the statute criminalizing gross negligence in mishandling classified information is invalid because it does not require proof of intent to improperly transmit classified information to places it's not supposed to be or to people not authorized to have it. So the director, Comey, claims that the statute has only been used once since its enactment in 1917, and therefore its invocation as written in Mrs. Clinton's case would be suspect. He implies that the only way to save the statute is for the Justice Department to do what prosecutors routinely tell judges they're not permitted to do: rewrite the statute, in this instance, to add a higher mens rea proof requirement. And then McCarthy says, with all due respect, this argument's very unconvincing for at least two reasons, and goes on to say, so the point of this is that Comey claims that the gross negligence statute didn't come into play here, and he could have used it because she was grossly negligent. He didn't use it. It's invalid because it didn't require proof of intent. So he's continuing to hang his hat on the fact that she didn't intend to do any of this. And he made the point today that you can't find a case where somebody has been imprisoned absent their intent to traffic. And as I watched that, I thought, well, that isn't true. But what do I know? He's the FBI director. And he's also former deputy attorney general, so he's got to know more than I do. But it seems to me I've read about sailors who inadvertently took pictures of a nuclear reactor on the sub to send back and show mom and dad. And he's in jail because that's classified. Nuclear reactor, you can't do it. And there clearly was no intent on the part of that sailor to send classified information to our enemies. He was just sending a picture home to mom or dad or some friends or whatever, if I recall right. So when Comey said that, he said, now you can't find a case where somebody has been put in jail or been convicted or been charged without the necessary intent. As it was. Seems to me there's a couple of them, and they've been written about recently. So anyway, that's that. Here is the first soundbite of Comey and his interchange here with Jason Chaffetz, who is the committee chairman.
To the FBI, we have no basis to conclude.
Wait a minute, I screwed that up. Stop that just a second. I forgot to tell you what the opening question was. Chaffetz, they were trying to get to the nub of this right off the bat. Chaffetz questioned to Comey, did Hillary Clinton lie?
To the FBI, we have no basis to conclude she lied to the FBI.
Did she lie to the public?
That's a question I'm not qualified to answer. I can speak about what she said to the FBI.
Did Hillary Clinton lie under oath?
Not to the FBI, not in a case we're working.
Did you review the documents where Congressman Jim Jordan asked her specifically, and she said, quote, there was nothing marked classified on my emails, either sent or received, end quote.
I don't remember reviewing that particular testimony. I'm aware of that being said, though.
Did the FBI investigate her statements under oath on this topic?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think there's been a referral from Congress.
Do you need a referral from Congress to investigate her statements under oath?
Sure do.
You'll have one. You'll have one in the next few hours.
You will have.
So it seems to me that the American people are only left, based on your assessment, with just a few options. Either Secretary Clinton herself is not a reasonable person, or she is someone who purposefully, willfully exhibited disregard for the law, or she is someone who sees herself as above the law. And to muddy the water even further, after listening to you lay out the facts of the investigation, much of what you said directly contradicted her in previous statements that she had made. I think as all is compiled, connecting the dots, that so many American people are irate that after all of this, there was not a recommendation for Secretary Clinton to be prosecuted. Now, I do greatly appreciate the fact that you came out with much more information on this than you would have in other cases. And I think that was the right thing to do. Undeniably, this is not a typical case. This is something of great public interest. Obviously, the subject of the investigation, former Secretary of State former senator, and all those things that we have talked about, former First Lady and so forth. And in addition to this, her husband, who happens to be the former President of the United States, is meeting privately with the Attorney General right before all of this interview takes place. Obviously, this is very suspicious, just the optics of it all. And at the same time that you're coming out, or more or less the same time that you are announcing the decision, Secretary Clinton is flying around in Air Force One with the president doing a campaign event. I mean, there's nothing about this case that's ordinary. There's nothing about the subject that's ordinary. So let me ask you this, Director. Did Secretary Clinton, in fact, comply with the department's policies or the Federal Records Act?
I don't think so. I know you have the State Inspector General here as more of an expert on all the department's policies, but at least in some respects, no.
So keeping the servers at home and all these types of things obviously is not in compliance with the department's policies.
Yes, and I've read the Inspector General's report on that. So that's part of the reason I can answer that part with some confidence.
Okay, and yet she said publicly that she fully complied. So there again is another issue. If you had the same set of facts, but a different subject, a different individual involved, say just an average ordinary State Department employee or an anonymous contractor, what would have been the outcome?
I'm highly confident there would be no criminal prosecution no matter who it was. There would be some range of discipline. They might get fired, they might lose their clearance, they might get suspended for 30 days. There'd be some discipline, maybe just a reprimand. I doubt it. I think it'd be higher on the discipline spectrum, but some sort of discipline.
So is it your opinion that there should likewise be some discipline in this case?
Yeah, that's not for me to say. I can talk about what would happen if it was a government employee under my responsibility.
Well, then what you're laying out is that there is a double standard. For someone else, a different subject, an anonymous contractor, or someone at the State Department, there would absolutely be discipline. But because of who the subject is, you're not willing to say there should be discipline. So there's, again, this whole issue. This is what the American people are so upset about. Let me say that when you stated that no reasonable prosecutor would pursue this case, is that because the subject of this investigation was unique?
No. There's no double standard there. There's no double standard either in the sense that if it was John Doe, former government employee, you'd be in the same boat. We wouldn't have any reach on the guy. He wouldn't be prosecuted.
But he would have some discipline.
Well, not if he had left government service.
Had they lied about having servers, had they lied about sending and receiving classified emails, had they lied about not deleting those emails to the public, had they lied about not having any marked classified, the statements are clearly documented. And you're saying that an average person would experience discipline by your own words, but Secretary Clinton does not deserve to be disciplined.
The gentleman's time has expired, but the director may answer if he wants to.
An average employee still in government service would be subject to a disciplinary process. Now, if they'd left, you'd be in the same boat.
Jordan yields back. Chair will now recognize his friend from Vernon.
And it has to be used with restraint. You obviously know that. You're being asked to, you have had to exercise that responsibility in the context of a very contested presidential campaign.
Democrat missive supporting Comey coming up. That's my bet.
And I go back to that evening of March 10, 2004, when the question was whether a surveillance program authorized after 9/11 by President Bush was going to continue, despite the fact that the Justice Department had come to an independent legal conclusion that it actually violated our constitutional rights. That's a tough call because America was insecure. The President was asserting his authority as Commander-in-Chief to take an action that was intended to protect the American people. But you and others in the Justice Department felt that whatever that justification was, the Constitution came first, and you were going to defend it. As I understand it, you were on your way home and had to divert your drivers to go back to the hospital to be at the bedside of a very sick, at that time, Attorney General. And you had to stand in the way of the White House Chief of Staff and the White House Counsel. I'm not sure that was a popular decision or one that you could have confidently thought would be a career booster. But I want to thank you for that. Fast forward, we've got this situation of a highly contested political campaign. And there is substantive concern that's legitimate by Democrats and Republicans for independent political reasons. But you had to make a call that was based upon your view of the law, not your view of how it would affect the outcome of who would be the next commander-in-chief. Others have asked this for you, but I think I'm close to the end. I want to give you a chance to just answer, I think, the bottom line questions here. Had you, after your thorough investigation, found evidence that suggested that criminal conduct occurred, is there anything, or anyone that could have held you back from deciding to prosecute?
No. I don't have the power to decide prosecution, but I'd have worked very hard to make sure that a righteous case was prosecuted.
And you would have made that recommendation to the Attorney General?
Yes.
Was there any interference, implicit or explicit, from the President of the United States or anyone acting on his behalf to influence the outcome of your investigation in the recommendation that you made?
No.
Was there
conspired to break numerous laws? And this is not the first time, by the way. This email business, her server, I mean, the intent. Comey was even asked about, didn't you find any intent in her having an off-site server? Didn't you find any intent in her setting up a server off-site? Didn't you find any intent? And she lied about only having one device. He said, well, no, I found convenience. She just wanted a more convenient setup. She found out that her husband had a server in the basement of their home and decided to use that. But Trey Gowdy, his point was that Hillary Clinton's not been careless at all, that she has been extremely careful. So we are up to audio soundbite number 4. And Gowdy starts out by saying, look, I'm gonna ask you to put on your old hat. Meaning, I want to take you back to where you're in the Department of Justice. You're not the FBI director, and you're a prosecutor. False exculpatory statements, they are used for what?
Either for the substantive prosecution or for evidence of intent in a criminal prosecution.
Exactly. Intent and consciousness of guilt, right? Is that right? Right. Consciousness of guilt and intent. In your old job, you would prove intent, as you just referenced, by showing the jury evidence of a complex scheme that was designed for the very purpose of concealing the public record. And you would be arguing, in addition to concealment, the destruction that you and I just talked about, or certainly the failure to preserve. You would argue all of that under the heading of intent. You would also be arguing the pervasiveness of the scheme, when it started, when it ended, and the number of emails, whether they were originally classified or unclassified. You would argue all of that under the heading of intent.
So Gowdy is walking everybody through. Look, Comey's answer to this was to not acknowledge any of this. But what Gowdy is doing, his audience is not Comey. His audience is us. His audience is the American people. His audience is social media. His audience is the drive-by media. Anybody wants to pick this up. Because this is really good what he did here. Because Comey says there wasn't intent. We can't find any intent. And Gowdy walks him through how in his...
There was one time it was charged in an espionage case, and the guy ended up pleading guilty to a different offense, so it was never adjudicated.
So, so that your concern is with the negligence threshold, that you think it requires mens rea, or knowing the crime. But in all 50 states, isn't there a negligent homicide statute, and aren't people prosecuted for that all the time? And doesn't the Supreme Court and all the courts below that uphold those prosecutions just on the basis of negligence?
I don't know whether all 50 50 states, I think negligent homicide and manslaughter statutes are relatively common.
Okay, so but don't all 50 states have something like that, and aren't those sustained in the upper courts, those convictions?
I don't know whether all 50 states have something like that, but again, I think it's very common, and I think those are sustained.
So don't we have a history of, you implied that the American judicial system doesn't have a history of convicting somebody for negligence, but don't we in other domains of justice?
We do. I know the federal system best. There are very few in the federal system. They're mostly, as we talked about earlier, in the environmental and food and drug administration area.
Thank you. Now I want to ask another question that's come up here. You've basically related to us that this information, this top secret or classified information, got into these email chains because of conversations people were having. They were relating what they heard before in other settings. Is that correct?
No. Maybe in some cases, but it was people having an email conversation about a classified subject.
Okay, so they were having an email conversation, but how in this email conversation did this bore marking show up? Like, if they're not sophisticated enough, as you said before, even Hillary Clinton wasn't sophisticated enough to recognize a bore marking to see with the parentheses for confidential or classified, if they weren't that sophisticated, how did they recreate that bore marking in their emails when they're having these discussions?
A lot of what ended up on Secretary Clinton's server were stuff that had been forwarded up a chain, gets to her from her staff, a lot of that forwarding, and then she comments sometimes on it. Someone down in the chain, in typing a paragraph that summarized something, put a portion marking, C, on that paragraph.
Doesn't it take a lot of intent to take a classified document from a setting that's authorized and secure to one that's not? Wouldn't it require intent for somebody to recreate that classification marking in an unsecure setting?
I don't know. It's possible, but also
do they accidentally type open parentheses C, close parentheses, and indent the paragraph?
Oh no, you wouldn't accidentally type.
Right. So
someone down the chain.
Right.
Someone down the chain.
Okay. So this is my question: is someone down the chain being investigated? Because they had the intent clearly. If they had the sophistication which Hillary Clinton, you insinuate, may have lacked, if they had the sophistication to know what this bore marking was, they had to have the intent to recreate it, or the intent to cut, copy, paste from a secure system to an unsecure system. Wouldn't that be correct?
Potentially, but we're not. There's not an open criminal investigation of that person way down the chain.
Shouldn't there be?
A criminal investigation?
An investigation if there's intent, which is what and I think you may be reasonable in requiring that threshold, but don't we treat everybody the same, whether at the top of the chain or the bottom of the chain?
Sure, you want to if the conduct is the same, but we did not criminally investigate whoever started that chain and put the C on on those paragraphs. We did.
Okay, I would suggest maybe you might want to do that, and I will yield back to the chairman.
I think I've spent most of my career operating in the high-tech industry, and today I've heard words such as common sense, reasonable person, carelessness, judgment, or lack thereof. I like these words. I understand these words. I think the average American does as well. So I'd like to focus on that. Last Tuesday, Director Comey, you said, and I quote, "None of these emails should have been on any kind of an unclassified system, but their presence is especially concerning because all these emails were housed on unclassified personal servers, not even supported by full-time security staff, like those found at agencies of the United States government, or even with a commercial email service such as Gmail." Director Comey, my small Iowa business doesn't even use Gmail for our email because it's not secure enough. I know some security experts in the industry. I check with them. The going rate to hack into somebody's Gmail account, $129. For corporate emails, they can be hacked for $500 or less. If you want to hack into an IP address, it's around $100. Now, I'm sure the FBI can probably do it cheaper. This is the going rate. Director Comey, are you implying in that statement that the private email servers of Secretary Clinton's were perhaps less secure than a Gmail account that is used for free by 1 billion people around this planet?
Yes, and I'm not looking to pick on Gmail. Their security is actually pretty good. The weakness is in the individual users, but yes, Gmail has full-time security staff and thinks about patching and logging and protecting their systems in a way that was not the case here.
I'd like to ask you, what kind of judgment, we're talking a lot about judgment today, does this decision to potentially expose to hackers classified information on email service that's less secure than Gmail, your words, what does that suggest to you? What type of judgment does that suggest to you?
It suggests the kind of carelessness that I talked about.
In August of last year, Secretary Clinton was asked by Ed Henry of Fox News whether she had wiped her entire server, meaning did she delete all the emails on her server? Her response, you mean with a cloth? March of 2015, during a press conference, Secretary Clinton assured us her private email server was secure, saying the server was on private property guarded by the Secret Service. Now, this would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. I know, you know, my constituents in eastern Iowa know you don't need to be a cat burglar to hack into an email server, and you don't need a cloth to wipe a server clean. One would think that a former United States Senator, one would think that a former Secretary of State would know this as well. Would you agree with that statement?
You would think, although as I said before, one of the things I've learned in this case is that the Secretary may not have been as sophisticated as people assume. She didn't have a computer in her office at the State Department, for example. So I don't think, so I would assume the same thing about someone who'd been a senator and a high-ranking official. I'm not sure it's a fair assumption in this case.
In your opinion, Director Comey, did Secretary Clinton know that a server could in fact be wiped clean electronically and not with a cloth?
Well, I assume that, I don't.
Would you assume she knows that?
I would assume that it was a facetious comment about a cloth, but I don't know. I don't know in particular on that one.
Would you also assume, Director, that Secretary Clinton knew that a server could be wiped clean electronically, that it could be hacked electronically, not physically? You don't need a cat burglar to hack a server. Would you assume, it would be reasonable to assume she knows that?
To some level, it would be reasonable, to some level of understanding.
Then once again, for someone who knew these things, or we assume to some level she knew these things, what kind of judgment does a decision to expose classified material on personal servers suggest to you? What type of judgment?
Well, again, it's not my place to assess judgment. I talk in terms of state of mind, negligence in particular. I think there was carelessness here, and in some circumstances, extreme carelessness.
Was her server hacked?
I don't know.
So that
proved that it was hacked.
So that answer says to me it could have been hacked.
Sure, yeah.
And if it was hacked, potentially damaging material, damaging to American secrets, damaging to American lives, could have been hacked, could have been exposed, correct? Lives could have been put at risk if that server was indeed hacked.
I'm not prepared to say yes as to that last piece. That would require me going into, in a way I can't hear the nature of the classified information, but there's no doubt that it would have potentially exposed information that was classified. Information is classified because it could damage the United States of America.
So it could have happened. The FBI just isn't aware.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
CNN host Don Lemon suggested, what is this, Thursday? This is Tuesday, that sexism was in part responsible for the criticism of Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server, commenting that as the first woman with a real shot at winning the White House, the men at the top would have a lot to say about her. Lemon compared the tumult over Clinton's emails to fireworks on the 4th of July. He said, this is CNN Tonight, I'm Don Lemon, and when you're the first woman with a real shot at winning the White House, you know at least one thing for sure. The men at the top are going to have a lot to say about you. You remember how outraged Don Lemon was over the treatment of Sarah Palin by the men at the top? I do too. Remember how outraged Don Lemon was very mad about how the men at the top were treating Sarah Palin when she might end up being the first female vice president? I don't recall that either. I don't remember one word of that. But that's how Don Lemon led his report on Comey's 15-minute statement Tuesday, in which he did not recommend charges to be brought against Clinton for her conduct at the State Department. And then Lemon played some clips from Trump criticizing Hillary and of President Obama emphatically praising her, while on the campaign trail, Trump and Obama, both men, playing into Lemon's narrative that sexism may play a role. Now, for what it's worth here, this is a Washington Free Beacon story. They point out here that Clinton's gender was not brought up at all in Comey's remarks about her and the investigation into her private email server, nor did they play into Obama and Trump's commentary about her. So it's unclear why Lemon would make such a remark about an issue having nothing to do with gender. Precisely. Why did he bring it up? That's what liberals do. Remember, Hillary Clinton is automatically qualified. That has been decided. Hillary Clinton's automatically qualified. Anybody coming along and says she isn't, well, it can't be because she's not qualified, because she is. They've determined that. So it has to be something else. And what do they conclude? It's always going to be racism, sexism, bigotry, or homophobia. I mean, those are the things that the Republicans are routinely accused of, that conservatives are routinely accused of, and have been accused of for decades. And by the way, those are the things that Republicans bend over backwards trying to prove are not true, and have been doing that for decades. Such as agreeing with the idea that we need comprehensive immigration reform, largely in part, not only to satisfy donors who demand it, but to show the Hispanics that we do like you. We're not racist like the Democrats say. And of course, it never works. You're in the process here trying to prove the old thing about proving a negative, which you can't do, but it keeps you on defense as a result. So, anyway, Don Lemon, I mean, I know he doesn't speak for everybody. He's not a noted historian or anything, but it is evidence of my theory in a bit of just a slight bit. Now, there's a Rasmussen poll out. Now, I know what you're... Come on, Rush Rasmussen. Now, wait a minute, folks. There have been stories this week, I've shared them with you, about how the Republicans had better stop this business of rejecting the polls. Right? There was one, I can't remember who wrote it. I think it was Washington Post. I know I was mentioned in it as one of many who thought that the polls were wrong on Romney in 2006, or 2008. Sorry, 2012. This is only 4 years ago that Romney ran. It seems like ages ago. But he's right. I mean, whoever wrote the story was right. We did think that the polls had it wrong. We thought because of the midterms in 2010 and 2014 and these massive energetic crowds that Romney was getting, these polls have to be wrong.
The things that I've heard from my colleagues about some of the attacks on your character and your integrity, I haven't heard those, and I hope that we have you've not experienced that. I also struggle with the change of heart that we're hearing today, because I have a list of elected officials who have questioned your investigation, even attacked it. In fact, the former President Clinton said this is a game. In fact, just last Friday, Ms. Wasserman-Schultz, Congresswoman Wasserman-Schultz, said Secretary Clinton is not the target of this investigation, or whatever you want to call it. My question to you today is, do you feel like this has been a Republican witch hunt? This hearing?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, I said at the beginning, I understand people's questions and interest, and I'm a huge fan of transparency. I think that's what makes our democracy great.
And I think that was one of the reasons of why you are so respected. To me, this hearing is about understanding and disseminating the facts, how you saw them, and how the American public sees them, and specifically in the areas of where there was wrongdoing admitted under your investigation, where there was obviously breaking the law, but also some cover-ups. Did Congress ask you to pursue this investigation?
No, it was a referral from the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community.
So it wasn't Republicans either, was it?
No.
How did you go about collecting the evidence?
We used the tools that we normally use in a criminal investigation.
Did or do you receive a congressional referral for all the information that you collected?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, then, one of the things that I'm struggling with, or that I would like to know specifically, is under oath, Ms. Clinton made these three comments that we now know are untrue in the Benghazi hearing. Number one, she's turned over all her work-related emails. Number two, telling the committee that her attorneys went through every single email. And then finally, and probably the one that continues to stick the most, there was, and I quote, nothing marked classified on my emails, end quote. Now, earlier, when the chairman questioned you about this, you said something about needing a congressional referral recommendation. My question is something of this magnitude. Why, or can you help me understand why didn't it rise to your investigation or someone bringing that to your knowledge as far as saying this is a problem, here she is, again, the Secretary Clinton lying under oath, specifically about our investigation?
We, out of respect for the legislative branch being a separate branch, we do not commence investigations that focus on activities before Congress without Congress asking us to get involved. That's a long-standing practice of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So we don't watch on TV and say we ought to investigate that. You know, Joe Smith said this in front of the committee. It requires the committee to say, we think we have an issue here. Would you all take a look at it?
But with all due respect, if you have the Secretary Clinton who is under oath speaking about your very investigation, and you've talked about your wonderful staff and certainly have no reason to deny that, why wouldn't that rise to the level of suspicion that here she is saying this under oath? I mean, lying under oath is a crime, is it not?
Yes.
And what's the penalty on that? That's considered perjury, right?
Perjury. It's a felony. I forget the exact, it's potentially years in prison.
But I don't understand. Would you help me understand why somebody wouldn't have tipped you off that she's talking about the very specific case under oath that you're investigating?
Well, there's a difference between us being aware of testimony and us opening a criminal investigation for potential perjury. Again, it's not this case in particular, but all cases. We don't do that without committee saying we think there was an issue in testimony given in this separate branch of the government.
You also mentioned earlier, and it's been quoted several times, that no reasonable prosecutor would move forward with some of the facts. Is there any room at all that somebody would differ a little bit on the opinion? I know that former United States Attorney General Michael Mukasey said with the illegal server, it disqualifies for her from ever holding any federal office. So there are some people of high esteem that may differ, obviously not privy to the exact facts, but can you make any room? You said no reasonable person. Do you understand why the American people, or would you understand why other people may say that she has stepped across the line or broken enough law here that you would come to a different conclusion?
Sure, I respect different opinions. My only point is, and I said earlier, I smile because those folks are my friends. I've worked with them for a long time. None of those guys in my position, I believe, knowing what I know, would think about it differently. But I also respect that they have a different view from the outside.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll back.
I think the gentleman now recognizes.
The phones will do that when we get back from the break coming up here at the bottom of the hour. But just to review some things that happened in the hearing this morning, the FBI Director, James Comey, said that Hillary knew she didn't have authority to have a server in the basement. But that did not mean that she intended to do anything. And Comey admitted before the committee today that Hillary's attorneys scrubbed multiple servers to prevent forensic discovery. But we can't say that that equals the intent that is in the statute. See, this is what everybody finds incredible. And what everybody's incredulous over is the intent was there from day one in just setting up this system, which is what Trey Gowdy's point is, that she was the opposite of careless, that she was explicitly careful. And we have a tweet here from Reuters. Are you ready for this? Get this. This is exactly what happens, folks. Tweet from Reuters. Update, FBI director says questionable whether Clinton had sophisticated enough understanding to recognize classified email markings. So, exactly my point. Normally, she's the smartest woman in the world. But there are times where she's this bumbling idiot who doesn't even know what the words top secret mean when they're when they're on documents that she's dealing with. FBI director says questionable whether Clinton had sophisticated enough understanding to recognize classified email. You see, she didn't know what she was doing.
Look, I don't want to go over everything that everybody's been through today. I mean, we've had some great questions here that have asked you about, you said this, she said that. Representative Gowdy made a great case of, this is what she said under oath and publicly, and yet you dispute that and say, no, this is the case. But, look, I've just got a couple of questions, okay? First of all, did I understand you correctly that this decision was made within 3.5 hours of an interview, and that was all?
No, we investigated for a year.
You investigated, but you interviewed her for 3.5 hours last week and then came to the conclusion.
Correct. We interviewed her on Saturday for 3.5 hours, the last step in a year-long investigation.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, Hillary Clinton has testified that the servers that she used were always safe and secure. Yet you refute that and say, no, that is not the case at all. Were they ever secure? Were the servers that she were using, were they ever secure?
Well, the challenge, security is not binary, it's just degrees of security. It was less secure than one at the State Department, or as I said, even one at a private commercial provider like a Gmail.
Well, let me ask you this. She's got staff, and she's got people around her. Did they know she was doing this? Did they know that she was using these other devices? Did anybody ever bring it to her attention and say, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that?
I think a lot of people around the secretary understood she was using a private, personal email setup.
Then why didn't they say something? Don't they have a responsibility as well?
That's an important question that goes to the culture of the State Department that's worth asking.
I mean, look, we all surround ourselves with good people and we depend on them to help us. I don't understand. Should they be held responsible for that, for not bringing that to someone's attention? If I see someone who's not following protocol, is it my responsibility to report them?
Yes.
Well, I
Especially
certainly...
when it comes to security matters, you have an obligation to report a security violation that you may witness, whether it's involving you or one of your coworkers. But this is about... So if
what about Brian Pagliano? Did he ever know? Do you know if he knew that she was not following proper protocol here?
He helped set it up.
He helped set it up. So obviously he knew.
Yeah, obviously he knew that.
Okay, is anything going to be done to him? Any prosecution or any discipline?
I don't know about discipline, but there's not going to be prosecution of him.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
My understanding, Director, is that you offered him immunity. Why did you offer him immunity, and what did you get for it?
Yeah, that I'm not sure what I can talk about in open setting about that.
Well, he's not going to be prosecuted, so.
Right, but I want to be careful. I'm doing this 24 hours after the investigation closed. I want to be thoughtful, because we're, as you know, big about the law, that I'm following the law about what I disclose about that. So I'll have to get back to you on that one. I don't want to answer that off the cuff.
Director Comey, I am not a lawyer. I'm not an investigator. I'm a pharmacist. But I'm a citizen, and citizens are upset. I watched with great interest earlier this week when you laid out your case. And I'm telling you, you laid it out, bam, 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 here's what she did wrong. And then all of a sudden you used the word, however. And it was like you could hear a gasp throughout the country of people saying, oh, here we go again. Do you regret presenting it in a way like that?
No, I'm highly, I think I didn't use the word however. I try never to use that in speaking, but I did lay it out, I thought, in the way that made sense and that I hoped was maximum transparency for people. And
but that's the point. I'm sorry, but that's the point. It didn't make sense. The way you were laying it out, it would have made sense, and the way the questions have been asked here, and we've made all these points of where she was obviously told lies under oath, that it would have been, okay, we finally got one here.
Yeah, I think it made sense. I just hope folks go back maybe with a cup of tea and open their minds and read my statement again carefully. But again, if you disagree, that's okay. But
when we just look, I've only been here 18 months, and I'm going to tell you, this inside the beltway mentality, no wonder people don't trust us.
Well, I have no. I know what you're talking about. I have no kind of inside the beltway mentality.
But this is an example of what I'm talking about here. It just was, as a non-lawyer, as a non-investigator, it would appear to me you have got a hell of a case.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, we don't, and I hope people will take the time to understand why.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize
made previously both to the public and to Congress that were not factually accurate. I think he went down the whole long list. When she met with you folks on Saturday last week, I take it she didn't say the same things at that interview?
I'm not equipped sitting here without the 302 in front of me to answer in that broad brush.
But it's your testimony.
But I have no basis. We do not have a basis for concluding she lied to the FBI.
Gotcha. Did anybody ask her on Saturday why she told y'all one thing and told us another?
I don't know as I sit here. I mean, I'll figure that out.
Would that have been of interest to you in helping to establish intent?
It could have been, sure.
More importantly, I think, did anybody ask her why she set up the email system as she did in the first place?
Yes.
And the answer was convenience?
Yeah, it was already there. It was a system her husband had, and so she just jumped onto it.
Were you aware that just earlier this week her assistant actually said it was for an entirely different reason? It was to keep emails from being accessible, and that it was for a concealment purpose? Uma Abedin was asked in her deposition why it was set up, and it was said to keep her personal emails from being accessible. Question, to whom? To anybody? Were you aware of that testimony?
Generally, yes.
Okay, so here's sort of the summary I take from what we've done today, which is that over the course of the entire system, what she did, she intentionally set up a system. According to your testimony, your findings, she was careless regarding its technical security. I think you said that even a basic free account, a Gmail account, had better security than she had. And she did that according to her own staffer's sworn deposition for the purpose of preventing access to those emails. As a result of this, she exposed top secret information to potential hack by foreign actors. You've seen the emails, we have not. I think you said earlier that the emails could be of the sort that would put national security at risk, and I think we had testimony earlier that got you to acknowledge that it might even put our agents overseas at risk.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that, but it's still important.
Okay, all right. She kept all of that secret until after she left the State Department. She lied about it, or at least made untrue statements about it, after it finally came to light. She thereafter ordered the destruction of evidence that was destroyed so thoroughly that you folks could not do an adequate recovery. Yet she receives no criminal penalty. So I guess this is my question to you. Are we to assume, as we sit here today, that if the next president of the United States does the exact same thing on the day he or she is sworn into office, sets up a private email service for the purpose of concealing information from the public or from anybody, that as a result of that potentially exposes national security level information to our enemies, lies about it, and then destroys the evidence during an investigation, that there'll be no criminal charges, if you're the FBI director, against that person?
Yeah, that's not a question the FBI director should answer. I mean,
no, I'm asking you if she does the exact same thing as president as she's done today, your result will be the exact same as it was 48 hours ago. There'll be no criminal findings, right?
If the facts were exactly the same?
Right.
And the law was exactly the same?
Right.
Yeah, the result would be the same.
And I guess under the theory that if the law is to be equally applied to everybody, that if a White House staffer does the exact same thing for the exact same purpose and exposes the exact same risks, that there'll be no criminal action against that person. There could be, as you've mentioned, administrative penalties. There are no administrative penalties, as I understand it, by the way, against the president, correct?
I don't think so, but I'm not a
I don't think there are either. I don't think you can take away the president's top security clearance, and I'm pretty sure you can't fire the president because we've tried. Not only would a staffer not have any criminal charges brought against them, but I suppose a summer intern could do the exact same thing under the theory that we're going to apply the law equally, regardless of who the people are. My question to you is this, and it's not a legal question. I guess it's a common sense, ordinary question that folks are asking me. From a national security standpoint, somebody who used to lecture on that, does that bother you?
The mishandling of classified information bothers me no matter what circumstance it occurs in, because it has national security implications.
Does it bother you that the precedent that you are setting today may well lead to a circumstance where our top secret information continues to be exposed to our potential enemies?
No, in this sense. The precedent that I'm setting today is my absolute best effort to treat people fairly without regard to who they are. If that continues to be the record of the FBI and the Justice Department, that's what it should be. The rest of the implications in your question are beyond that. They're important, but they're not for the FBI to answer. We should aspire to be apolitical, facts and the law, treat Joe the same as Sally, as Secretary so-and-so. That's my goal.
If you would come to a different decision, by the way, I tend to agree everything you just said. If you would come to a different decision, do you think that would have a different precedential value that would keep our information more safe?
If we decided to recommend criminal charges here? I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I could argue it both ways. I guess I'm a lawyer. I can argue everything both ways, but I could argue that both ways.
Thank you, Director Comey. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman.
Immunity with him.
I am aware.
Now that Attorney General Lynch has stated that there will be no charges, there's many that suspect that that he failed to answer questions in his congressional deposition, that he had something to hide. Why did your investigators at the DOJ decide it was necessary to offer Mr. Pagliano immunity?
As I said in response to the earlier question, I need to be more thoughtful about what I say about an immunity deal in public. Maybe totally fine. I just don't want to screw up because we're doing this so quickly.
Okay.
In general, I can answer, because I've done it many times as a prosecutor. You make a grant of immunity in order to get information that you don't think you could get otherwise.
But you know that there may be something there in hindsight, right? You're looking ahead because the pertinent information this person possesses.
Right. You believe they have relevant information to the investigation.
So, did the investigators draft an interview report known as a 302 with Mr. Pagliano?
Yes.
Given the importance of this case, will you commit to voluntarily disclosing the 302s for review of Brian Pagliano and other witnesses interviewed as part of your investigation?
I'll commit to giving you everything I can possibly give you under the law, and to doing it as quickly as possible. That said, then that means I got to go back and sort it out. For example, the 302 of Secretary Clinton is classified at the TSSCI level, so we got to sort through all that, but we'll do it quickly.
Yeah, I know you've done this because you've done this for Lois Lerner and other cases, so we would expect that. Now, Director Comey, Hillary Clinton testified before Congress and told the American people multiple times that she never emailed any classified information to anyone on her private email servers. Your investigation revealed 110 of Clinton's emails and 52 email chains contain classified information. Clinton told the American people, and I quote, "The laws and regulations in effect when I was Secretary of State allowed me to use my email for work. This is undisputed," end of quote. Your investigation revealed that also wasn't true. Clinton claims she turned over all her work-related emails. Your investigation revealed that this wasn't also true. Clinton claimed that there was no security breaches and her private servers had numerous safeguards. Your investigation revealed 8 email chains on Clinton's private servers containing top-secret information, and that it was possible hostile actors gained access to sensitive information. Further, multiple people she emailed with regularity were hacked by hostile actors, and her private servers were less secure than a Gmail account, making a security breach all the more likely. Director Comey, it's a federal crime, as you know, to mishandle classified information in a grossly negligent way, and you stated Clinton and her colleagues were extremely careless. Clinton has publicly stated she was well aware of the classification requirements, yet she broke the law anyway. Multiple people have been prosecuted for less, and there is a growing trend of abuses in senior-level employees. The only difference between her and others is her total resistance to acknowledge her irresponsible behavior that jeopardized our national security and the American people. I think you should have recommended Clinton be prosecuted under Section 793 or Section 1024 of Title 18. If not, who? If not now, when? Your recommendation deprived the American people of the opportunity for justice in this matter. There shouldn't be a double standards for the Clintons, and they shouldn't be above the law. With that, I'm going to yield the rest of my time to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy.
intent for just a second. We can disagree on whether or not it's an element of the offense. Let's assume for the sake of argument that you're right and I'm wrong, and that it is an element of the offense. Secretary Clinton said that she was, quote, well aware of classification requirements. Those are her words, not mine and not yours. So if she were, quote, well aware of classification requirements, how did that impact your analysis of her intent? Because I've heard you this morning describe her as being less than sophisticated. She disagrees with that.
Well, I was talking about technical sophistication. The question is, I would hope everybody who works in the government is aware of classification requirements. The question then is, if you mishandled classified information, when you did that thing, did you know you were doing something that was unlawful? That's the intent question.
All right. Well, you and I are going to have to get together some other time and discuss all the people we prosecuted who were unaware that they were breaking the law. There are lots of really dumb defendants out there who don't know that what they're doing is against the law. But let's go with what you say.
I disagree. You may have prosecuted a lot of those folks. I did not prosecute a lot of those folks.
I was a gutter prosecutor and you were a white-collar prosecutor. Trust me, there are lots of people who don't know you can't kill other people. Let me ask you this. On the issue of intent, you say it was convenience, okay? You're a really smart lawyer. If it were convenience, Director, she wouldn't have waited 2 years to return the documents, and she wouldn't have deleted them 4 years after they were created. So you can't really believe that her intent was convenience when she never turned them over until Congress started asking for them, could you?
My focus, and I hope I made this clear, my focus is on what was the thinking around the classified information. I mean, it's relevant why the system was set up and the thinking there, but she didn't, I don't understand her to be saying, well, I think I've said it already, but that's my focus.
So, I know I'm out of time, but it just strikes me you are reading a specific intent element into a gross negligence statute, not even general intent.
Gentlemen's
a
time.
Specific intent
Gentlemen's time is
element.
expired.
I'm sorry.
Go. The director can answer.
I enjoy talking with him. The question you got to ask is, so why is it that the Department of Justice, since 1917, has not used that gross negligence statute, but charging it once in an espionage case? And whether their decision was smart or not, that is the record of fairness. And so you have to decide, do I treat this person against that record? And if I do, is that a fair thing to do? Even if you're not worried about the constitutionality of it, and my judgment is no reasonable prosecutor would do that. That would be celebrity hunting. That would be treating this person differently than John Doe.
Colleagues sent and received emails marked classified on an unsecured private email server that may or may not have been hacked by a foreign power. Are you aware that teenage hackers hacked the personal email accounts of CIA Director John Brennan, the Director of U.S. National Intelligence James Clapper, and FBI Deputy Director Mark Giuliano?
I am intensely aware. They didn't hack in the way we normally think of it, but that they, by trickery, got access to their account.
The point I want to make is that these were commercially protected personal email accounts that contained no classified information. If Mrs. Clinton used her personal email, not a commercial account, on a server in her basement without even this basic protection and transmitted classified information through that account, if teenagers in England were able to hack the personal email accounts of the Director of the CIA, the Director of U.S. National Intelligence, and the Deputy Director of FBI, does it concern you that sophisticated hackers or hackers working for foreign interests never attempted, does it seem reasonable that they never attempted or were never successful in hacking Mrs. Clinton's personal email accounts or one of her devices?
It concerns me a great deal, and that's why we spent so much time to see if we could see fingerprints of that.
Well, you said in your statement regarding your recommendation not to prosecute, to be clear, this does not suggest that in similar circumstances a person who engaged in this activity would face no consequences. To the contrary, these individuals are often subject to security or administrative sanctions, but that is not what we're deciding here. Do you stand by that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I thought you would. You also said you could not prove intent. I want to touch on a couple things here. One, a reasonable person would not have compromised classified information by keeping that information on inadequately secure private devices. In other words, such a person would be viewed as unreasonable. And
and unsuitable for any position in our government that included any responsibility for handling and protecting classified information. Would you agree?
I would agree it would be negligent. I can't prejudge a suitability determination, but it would definitely be stared at very hard.
Well, let me tell you why I bring this up. I sat here next to Mr. Hurd, who served our country valiantly, put his life on the line. And I don't know if you could sense the passion and intensity of his questions, because he knows people whose lives are on the line right now. And in regard to his questions, if someone, a U.S. intelligence agent, had their mission compromised, or worse, had been killed or injured or captured because of the carelessness of someone responsible for protecting classified information, would intent matter at that point?
In deciding whether to prosecute the person, of course. But yeah, that's the answer. Of course it would. It would. The matter would be deadly serious, but the legal standards would be the same.
Well, what we're dealing with in this hearing is not the lack of due diligence in handling routine government data or information, but the lack of due diligence by Secretary Clinton and her carelessness in handling classified information that could have compromised American national security and, as Mr. Hurt pointed out, the missions and personal safety of our intelligence agents. That troubles me greatly. And I think the issue here, and I do respect you, I have spoken in your defense many times, at this point to my detriment. But I do believe that your answers are honest and factual, but based on your answers regarding Mrs. Clinton's use of email, and based on what we know, it seems to me that she is stunningly incompetent in her understanding of the basic technology of email, and stunningly incompetent in handling classified information. I mean, you should never associate the Secretary of State and classified information with the word careless. It doesn't matter. I mean, we have to exercise the utmost due diligence. All of us in this committee do in handling this. You do in prosecuting cases. And I see that in what you're trying to do. I just think we need to leave here with this understanding that there's more to this story than we know. If a foreign hacker got into this, I can assure you that they know what was in those emails that were deleted. They read them all. They know what is in the emails that we never received. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Because you feel you can't prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and in part because she didn't understand the laws with regard to emails and servers and that sort of thing. Question for you. When she erased these emails, or no, I digress for a second. You, however, did say that if somebody did this under you, there would be consequences. If somebody did exactly what Mrs. Clinton did, but was one of your lieutenants, or you think one of the lieutenants under the CIA or some other agency that deals with top secret documents, what would you do to those underlings?
I would make sure that they were adjudicated through a security disciplinary proceeding to figure out what are all the circumstances and then what punishment discipline is appropriate. That could range from being terminated to being reprimanded, and then a whole spectrum in between: suspension, loss of clearance. It's a bunch of different options.
Okay, but somehow, let's say one of your top 2 or 3 lieutenants, you find out that they've had this separate server out there and they're keeping secret documents, flipping them around. Do you think they should be fired? Not criminally charged, but fired?
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate to say. I think it should go through. We have a very robust process. There ought to be a very intense suitability review of that person. Maybe there's something we're missing that would mitigate the punishment we would impose, but it would have to go through our system.
Okay, next question. Just for the listening audience here. At first, when I hear about erasing emails, I think it's like on my own phone where I might erase an auto insurance solicitation. The erasures here, however, were not just Mrs. Clinton pressing delete, were they? There was a much greater effort made to make sure that these emails would never be recovered. Do you want to comment on what was done to erase the emails?
I think what you're referring to is after her lawyers say, although I'm not able to verify this, there were 60,000 or so left at the end of 2014. They went through them in a way I described in my statement 2 days ago, and then they produced the ones that were work-related, and then they erased from their system the ones that were not work-related. That was done using technical tools, basically, to remove them from the lawyers, from the servers, to wipe them away.
Okay, so in other words, the effort was not just Mrs. Clinton or somebody went delete, delete, delete. They went above and beyond that so that your top technical experts could not get back at these emails, correct?
Right, not fully. We were able to, by going...
You recovered a few.
Yeah, we could go through the lawyers' laptops and see some traces, but not fully recover them.
Okay, now, the information that I have, you can correct me if I'm wrong, implies that these erasures were done in December of 2014, after the Benghazi scandal broke, after there were questions about the Clinton Foundation. Did you ever come across why she allowed these emails to sit out there, even for years after she stopped being Secretary of State, but all of a sudden, as these other scandals began to bubble up, she felt, or her lawyers felt, that she had to erase them?
I think the way the process worked is she had emails that were just on her system. She actually had deleted some, I think, over time, as an ordinary user would. And then the State Department contacted her and other former secretaries and said, we have a gap in our records. We need you to look and see if you have emails and give them back. She then tasked her lawyers to engage in this review process of that 60-some thousand and make that cut, and then was asked by her lawyers at the end, do you want us to keep the personal emails? She said, I have no use for them anymore. It's then that they issued the direction that the technical people delete them.
Do you think Mrs. Clinton knew that the technical people were erasing these emails so that even your top technical experts could recover them?
Based on my sense now of her technical sophistication, I don't think so.
You don't think the lawyers told her that that's what they were doing, erasing all these emails that everybody on this committee wanted to look at?
Yeah, and I'm sure we've asked this.
What type of lawyer wouldn't tell their client they were doing that? But
I don't think they. I think our evidence from our investigations, they did not. That they asked her, "Do you want to keep them?" And they said no, and they said wipe them away.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, the goal was just to erase personal emails, but you've recovered emails that wouldn't be considered personal emails at all.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know that you didn't recover them, but based upon the emails that you recovered, presumably her lawyers or somebody was going well beyond personal emails. Is it possible we'll never be able to recover emails that dealt with the Clinton Foundation or dealt with the Benghazi scandal? Is it possible because of what her lawyers did that they were erasing things that were incriminating, maybe involving items that you yourself were not particularly investigating, but that these have now been destroyed forever?
It's possible, as I said in my statement on Tuesday, we did not find evidence to indicate that they did the erasure to conceal things of any sort. But it's possible, as I said on Tuesday, that there are work-related emails that were in the batch that were deleted.
I'm sorry, when you go to this length to make sure you can never recover the emails who are erased, wouldn't you think the intent is to make sure nobody ever looks at them again? Why otherwise would you just go delete?
I think the gentleman will give the director time to, if he wants to respond.
I guess it's a bit circular. You delete because you want to delete. But what I mean is we didn't find any evidence of evil intent, an intent to obstruct justice there.
You wouldn't have been able to.
I think
because you don't know it was deleted, but
I think the gentleman.
For the record, with regard to national security, I sleep a little easier at night knowing that you're at the helm of the FBI. Thank you for your dedicated service and your integrity. You have stated in your statement and also multiple times here that there should be consequences for the mishandling of state secrets. If I held a top secret SCI in the Bureau, and I did hold one when I was in the United States Army in a career of service, I handle classified information here, but if I held that in the FBI and you discovered that I mishandled state secrets on a private server in my basement, would I be trusted by the Bureau to further handle top secret SCI information?
Maybe not. You would go immediately through a security process to review whether you should continue working for us, and if you do, what clearances you should retain.
If I violated the handling of state secrets in the FBI, would you consider me the best suitable candidate for promotion and higher responsibility?
It would be a serious concern, and we would stare at it very hard in a suitability review.
Although you have recommended to the Department of Justice that no criminal charges be brought to bear, are you recommending to the Department of Justice that there be no consequences for the mishandling of state secrets?
No, my recommendation was solely with respect to criminal charges.
What would you recommend?
I don't think it's for me to recommend.
But you do. You've been very open and even stated why you felt that these were unique sets of circumstances that called for greater transparency. You do make recommendations routinely, as you've stated here today. We're talking top secret SCI information that's been mishandled. You would take a dim view to that if I were an agent. What consequences? This is what the American people feel exasperated about. There seems to be no consequence. So, in a case like this, if it's not going to be criminal charges recommended, what are the American people to do to hold their officials accountable if maybe they shouldn't be trusted for further promotion and higher responsibility?
And what I meant earlier is that's not a question that the American people should put to the FBI director. I can answer about the things within my remit, but that I understand the question, but it's not one for me to answer in my role.
Well, I hope it's one that the American people answer in the future, because we do have a choice about those that would mishandle information. And while we're all fallible human beings and we all make mistakes, in a case like this, I mean, for decades of my service in the Army Infantry and handling top secret SCI information, and then as a member of Congress, we know those responsibilities. Is it your view and others that have interviewed Mrs. Clinton that she would not have known what those responsibilities were?
No, I think in a way you would expect she understood the importance of protecting classified information.
Well, I would agree with that, and there's been a breach. I think that the American people demand a consequence, that they demand an accountability, and I think it's important to uphold the form of our Republican government, that we have a consequence. And with that, thank you for your appearance here today, and I would like to yield the remainder.
And again, we'll do so with equal time. How did the Department of Justice, or how did the FBI view the incident in which Hillary Clinton instructed Jake Sullivan to take the markings off of a document that was to be sent to her?
Yeah, we looked at that pretty closely. There was some problem with their secure fax machine, and there's an email in which she says, in substance, take the headers off of it and send it as a non-paper. As we've dug into that more deeply, we've come to learn that, at least there's one view of it that is reasonable, that a non-paper in State Department parlance means a document that contains things we could pass to another government. So essentially take out anything that's classified and send it to me. Now, it turned out that didn't happen because we actually found that the classified fax was then sent, but that's our best understanding of what that was about.
So this was a classified fax?
Correct.
So Hillary Clinton sends to Jake Sullivan, let me go back. Jake Sullivan says, they say they had issues sending secure fax, they're working on it. Hillary Clinton sends to Jake Sullivan, if they can't, turn into non-paper with no identifying heading and send non-secure. So you're telling me it's a classified piece of information, she's taking off the header, and she's instructing them to send it in a non-secure format. Is that not intent?
Well, it actually caught my attention when I first saw it, and what she explained to us during our interview was, and other witnesses did as well, is what she meant by that is make it into a non-classified document. That's what a non-paper is in their world, and send it to us, because I don't need the classified stuff, I just need the...
Then why take off the heading? If it's going to be turned into a non-classified document, why take off the heading?
I assume because it would be non-classified anymore, so you wouldn't have a classified header on it. think is what she said during our
She wanted to be technically correct? Is that what you're saying? That you're
No, I think what she said during the interview is, I was telling him, in essence, send me an unclassified document. Take the header off, turn it into a non-paper, which is a term I'd never heard before, but I'm told by people I credit that in diplomatic circles that means something we can pass to another government.
You are very generous in your accepting of that. Let me ask you, Director, did any uncleared individuals receive any classified information over Hillary Clinton's server?
Did any uncleared people receive classified information? I don't think any of the correspondence on the classified emails were uncleared people. These were all people with clearances working, doing State Department business on the unclassed system.
Did Mr. Pagliano have the requisite security clearance?
As I sit here today, I can't remember. He was not a participant on the classified email exchanges, though.
But he was running the server. He set it up.
That's a different question. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question then. Yeah, there's no doubt that uncleared people had access to the server, because even after Pagliano, there were others who maintained the server who were private sector folks.
So there are hundreds of classified documents on these servers. How many people without a security clearance had access to that server?
I don't know the exact numbers. I sit here. It's probably more than 2, less than 10.
I appreciate your willingness to follow up with this. Did Secretary Clinton's attorneys have the security clearances needed?
They did not.
Does that concern you?
Oh yeah, sure.
Is there any consequence to an attorney rifling through Hillary Clinton's emails without a security clearance?
Well, not necessarily criminal consequences, but there's a great deal of concern about an uncleared person not subject to the requirements we talked about in the read-in documents potentially having access. That's why very, very important for us to recover everything we can back from attorneys.
So what's the consequence? I mean, here, Hillary Clinton gave direction to her attorneys without a security clearance to go through documents that were classified.
I think that's what happened in fact. Whether that was the direction is a question I can't answer sitting here.
So you're parsing that one a little bit for me.
No, you were just asking me. I don't
What's
know.
the consequence? They don't work for the government. We can't fire them. So is there no criminal prosecution of those attorneys? Should they lose their bar license? What's the consequence to that?
Well, if they acted with criminal intent or acted with some malintent.
What you're telling us is it doesn't matter if you have a security clearance or not. Because I may be innocent enough. Hey, I'm just an attorney. I like the secretary. I'm trying to help Hillary Clinton. I'm not trying to give it to the Chinese or the Russians. I'm just trying to help her. So there's no intent? It doesn't matter if these people have security clearances?
Of course it matters. That's why I said that.
But there's no consequence, Director. There's no consequence.
Well, I don't know what consequence you'd have in mind.
Prosecute them.
An attorney for receiving from his client information that ends up being classified.
I asked you at the very beginning, does there a reasonable expectation that Hillary Clinton would send and receive, if not hourly, if not daily, classified information? That's reasonable to think that the Secretary of State would get classified information at every moment. She's not the head of Fish and Wildlife. So the idea that she would turn over her emails, her system, her server to what it sounds like up to 10 people without security clearances, and there's no consequence. So why not do it again?
That's a question I don't think you should put to me. I'm talking about my criminal investigation.
But how can that, there's no intent there? Does she not understand that these people don't have security clearances?
Surely she understands at least some of them don't have security clearances.
So if she understands they don't have security clearances, and it's reasonable to think she's going to be in classified information, is that not intent to provide a non-cleared person access to classified information?
You're mixing it up, though. I don't think it's reasonable to assume, mixing me up, sorry, it's not your fault, that that someone who is maintaining your server is reading your emails. In fact, I don't think that's the case here. There's a separate thing, which is when she's engaging counsel to comply with the State Department's request, are her lawyers then exposed to information that may be on there that's classified? So,
and did they see any classified information? Did Hillary Clinton's attorneys, without security clearances, see classified information?
Sit here, I don't know the answer to that.
It has to be yes, Director. You came across 110 and they said they went through all of them.
Well, they didn't read them all. They just looked at headers.
So their excuse is, we saw the emails, but we didn't read them?
No, I think I said this in my statement on Tuesday. They sorted the emails by using headers and search terms to try and find work-related emails. We read them all.
I know that you read them all. Do you think it's reasonable or unreasonable to think that her attorneys, under her direction, did or did not read those emails? Because there were, let me go back to this, yes or no. Were there or were there not classified emails that Hillary Clinton's attorneys read?
I don't know whether they read them at the time.
Did Hillary Clinton give non-cleared people access to classified information?
Yes.
What do you think her intent was?
I think then was to get good legal representation and to make the production to the State Department. That could be a very tall order in that circumstance. I don't see the evidence there to make a case that she was acting with criminal intent in her engagement with her lawyers.
And I guess I read in criminal intent as the idea that you allow somebody without a security clearance access to classified information. Everybody knows that, Director. Everybody knows that. I've gone way past my time. Let me recognize Mr. Cummings for an equal amount of time.
Official knows people in the FBI. And he clearly said numerous times, they've got so much evidence, she's going to be indicted. I know you remember this. And then he said, again, if she's not, there's going to be so many people fed up with all the work they did and all the evidence they gathered that there's going to be resignations, I think is what he said. You'll see. So the University of Chicago Poli-Sci prof says, just keep a sharp eye. See if there are any leaks from disgruntled FBI agents down the road who disagree with what has been presented here as the official story. And then this point needs to be brought home again. Hillary is not doing a victory lap. That's a big deal in the sense that she knows it isn't over. You know, running around, beating her chest, going, nah, 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 beat you again, they found nothing. They looked at me for months and months and years, and she can't do that. If she runs around doing that, she just inspires and motivates people even more to come up with stuff. She's not commenting on it. So, and Clinton did. Bill Clinton, every time he escaped the surly bonds of one of these investigations, he went out there and rubbed everybody's nose in it. But Hillary hasn't done that, nor has Obama. I got to take a break here, folks. Hang on.
Freedom of Information Act.
Correct.
You did not look at testimony that Hillary Clinton gave in the United States Congress, both the House and the Senate.
To see whether it was perjurious in some respect?
Yes.
No, we did not.
Did you review and look at those transcripts as to the intent of your recommendation?
I'm sure my folks did. I did not.
So, okay, and this is an important point because I think those of us in Congress, knowing that you got a criminal referral from an inspector general, thought that you were also looking at whether or not Hillary Clinton had provided false testimony, which is a crime, to the Congress. But you didn't look at that.
Correct. As I said, I'm confident my folks looked at the substance of the statements, trying to understand the circumstances around the entire situation.
Can you confirm that for me? I just want to
confirm that. But and also, again, maybe I'm missing this, but I don't think we got a referral from congressional committees, a perjury referral.
No, it was the Inspector General that initiated this.
Yeah.
Did the fact that Hillary Clinton refused to be interviewed by the Inspector General What did that say to you about intent?
Not, at least for our criminal investigation, not particularly germane.
Are you familiar? There's a website. I mean, lots of government agencies have websites. The State Department has a website, state.gov, and they have a YouTube site. Videos that are uploaded to a YouTube site, would those be considered federal records?
I don't know.
So they're paid for by federal dollars. They're maintained by federal employees. Would that not be a federal record?
Yeah, I just don't know. I'm sure there's an expert who could answer that in 2 seconds, but I'm not that expert.
Okay, we've kept you here a long time. I want to follow up on that. Is the FBI still investigating Hillary Clinton's aides?
No is the answer. The Department of Justice declined on all of those who were subjects communicating with her through that email system.
What recommendations did you make about her aides?
Same. We didn't recommend that anybody be prosecuted on those facts.
And if you could help us understand who precisely had been ruled out for prosecution, that would be...
Sure.
Did you look at the Clinton Foundation?
I'm not going to comment on the existence or non-existence of any other investigations.
Was the Clinton Foundation tied into this investigation?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that.
The server that was set up in her home was originally set up by, you said, former President Bill Clinton.
Correct.
Do you know who paid for that?
I don't, sitting here.
Okay. I'll allow some equal time now for my colleague, friend, Mr. Cummings.
I'm going to yield 2